Hello. So, hello everyone. I'll just wait 1 or 2 minutes because I cannot see how many people are already here, but I'll just expect that in 1 or 2 minutes we will be everyone. I hope you can see my screen as supposed to. Perfect. Thanks. So at least I can see some people are here as well. Then I will slowly start. Then very welcome to today's presentation, to the brief webinar that we have on the European AI Act and about how to certify AI by the TÜV Austria Group. So, 1 second. Before we start with the core of the topic, just some brief words about the TÜV Austria and also the TÜV Austria in Czech Republic. Generally speaking, I suppose most of you do know the TÜV Austria Group in some kind of way. We are part of the TÜV organization, which is located in Germany, like several TÜVs are located there, and we are the Austrian site of the same organization. We have more than 3,400 employees in 34 countries right now. And as basically a testing and inspection company, our core is, of course, inspection of mainly safety critical or cybersecurity critical infrastructure, processes, etc. And actually, we have too many businesses already and too many domains and branches right now to name all of them. Most relevant for us here in the round, of course, is the AI quality management and AI product certification that we operate. We do several things with cybersecurity, which is also running a cybersecurity operations center, and carry out the classical conformity assessments, etc. We are also in machinery, functional safety, and have, of course, a set of testing laboratories, as every kind of TÜV, I suppose, has. So what does the TÜV Austria in Czech Republic has to do with AI? That's what I have here in this slide. We were basically the first ones who started researching and published our white paper about how to make sure that AI is supposed what it's doing on a technical and statistical basis in 2021. And right now we are operating faculty at the Johannes Kepler University in Linz, where there are 3 PhDs researching and basically processing our set of methods and activities that we apply to our clients' AIs. And we also have a strategic partnership with SCCH, a research center on AI. So TÜV Austria really has, say, strong partners and know-how that is dating back already 7 years of activity to be sure that we can really talk about AI safety on a deeper level than many companies do, because many just talk about ethics and basically legal compliance, but skip the really interesting part. And this is where we, as TÜV Austria Group, are strong, I think. We do not only do, of course, certification, but mainly right now consulting. As you might know, and maybe also as you experience in your companies, AI is a fresh topic, kind of, and many companies try new projects, try new activities and services. So most of them first want to know, what is AI and how does it work and how can it be used? And that's where we basically do trainings, workshops, and also consultings. But as a member of the TÜV Group, we are, of course, in the core a certification company focusing on processes and products. So we have as you might have noticed, we're a group. We have several legal entities and can basically provide certification and consulting from one hand without violating the objectivity and independent requirements that all inspection bodies have. Also, a brief slide, just as brief as, let's say, overview of the clients who accepted that they can be published in this kind of meeting, just to show you that we are not completely fresh. We are already for some years on the market and had some quite big companies as well in the medical area, in the automotive area, in the banking finance area, but also in the machinery and processing area, and some others who didn't want to be on these slides here. But just naming, we are not that new. The first section, the first content section of today is AI and alignment that I'd like to talk about. Maybe some of you already digged a bit into the AI topic, or at least heard about it somewhere. Maybe some of you are even much more in the topic, and I'd just like to make a brief circle around basically the state where we start our discussions and what we are talking about. Many people, when they hear AI, think about the big general purpose AI models, which are out there in the internet right now. And some people even think that these systems in some kind of way think like a human or perform like a human. When we talk about the AI Act and AI certification, then we do not really talk about, here on the left hand of the screen, some kind of beings that have an intention, that have some kind of will or hidden agenda that they follow, because our intelligence is not, let's say, a pure form of intelligence. It's kind of interlinked with our biological being, with the need and will to survive and to basically outperform others, to, like this guy here on the small picture, steal the fried chicken before someone else does. And just basically a funny small excursus that basically anthropomorphism, as many people use it, is not really helping us for discussing and certifying and testing AI. Because what we have here are quite sophisticated, complex statistical models. They get everything they know from the training data, of course, with some generalization, but there was even I think it was yesterday, a very recent paper, a study pointing out that indeed they just know what they learn from the data, and that generalization does not go so far that they really learn something which was not at all represented. So we really have statistical models, and we can describe that mathematically, and we must understand we have objective calculation and some randomness in it that give us some result that looks human-like, and that's a core thing, a core thought that we try to keep upright in the next hour. That also sheds some new light on the classical software development as we know it, be it for desktop applications or for some kind of embedded systems. Because the classical approach for software development is that someone basically, or a team of people, take a seat somewhere and have some idea or some requirements, and they create a formal specification about what a controller or what some kind of piece of software is supposed to do. Because we did not so far, at least on a large scale, have the approach that the software that we will write is learning on its own what to do. That gives us huge benefits, because these machine learning approaches, in a bit a narrower context, give us the possibility to implement and solve things that are not formally specifiable and cannot really be handled by classical approaches. But they also bring the disadvantage that we first of all have to find out what did these things really learn and what are they going to do, and is this still what we wanted to have when we wrote basically the algorithm and trained the model. So in a nutshell, in a very brief overview, this is the things that are behind most of the models. We are talking about classifying data, finding similarities in data, which is basically one root of all kinds of intelligence. We talk about linearization of problems, about dimension reductions, or about finding some kind of anomal behaviors and say what's usual, what's not usual anymore in a highly complex data input set. So that's where AI can really help us. And even if it looks a bit like some would say magic, what's coming out of it in the end, we must think back to these kind of basics and say that's how the system is running, and that's where we have to look at when we want to make sure on a mathematical level that it's going to do what it's doing. That was quite abstract now, sorry for that. Short example to make it on an easy basis a bit more easy. Maybe if you want to type in the chat, what would you say, which one of these are more similar? Is A or B more similar, or C or D? Or is it A and D, or C and B? You can give it a try. If not, I can help a bit. Sorry, that was the wrong field. If not, I can help a bit. Most people, or many people in these examples usually say it's like A and B, which are very similar because that's bananas. Some people say A and C is similar because both is 4. But that's exactly, I think, a nice example about what I discussed before. Counting actually is a cultural technique, and if we don't learn it before a certain age, I think it was 7 or 8, we will never learn it. So that's something quite human, and this is not the first connotation. A and B would be the common connotation that people say bananas taste like bananas, so that's kind of similar, but that's probably also not what a machine would see, because if you see it from a computer vision point of view, most pixels in A and D are black. So dark and dark is similar, and bright is similar. And we have to think, when we make these things, learn proximity and basically learn it to make decisions between apples and bananas and kind of things like that, we have to make sure that it did not learn anything what was not considered, or learn some so-called bias from the training data, or just focus on something that we don't care about at all and focuses instead on other things. And this is a thing that we really commonly see in audits, of course, not on such a simple level, but you would be astonished how many machine learning projects or AI projects are having problems at this stage. Yeah, so much about that. By the way, if there are any questions, or if I should talk slower or louder or anything, please just let me know in the chat, and we can try to answer it right away. I'm quite pro interaction. And in the meantime, I start with the second chapter, the overview about the AI Act. Now we discussed what is AI and what is the type of AI that we're discussing about. And we need that background knowledge also when we jump into the AI Act, because also here we're having the same thought in the back of the head. All in all, the AI Act, as you probably have seen in the media, entered into force on 1st of August 2024, so just a couple of days ago. But of course, there was a story before. They published a white paper some years ago, and there were several steps of discussions and hundreds of comments. Also from our organization, there was someone, or actually 2 people, joining these discussions and discussing what kind of parts of the AI Act should be removed and which should stay there. And the background of all of the meaning is we want to, like in the fields of machinery or medtech or other kind of regulated sectors, ensure that within the European Union products can be placed on the market, and that we have a harmonized framework on how to deal with these risks. And the AI Act also gives us some kind of handling over the supply chain. It defines who is responsible for what, also like in other standardizations, and it also defines the penalties that we have to pay if we are non-compliant. More to that in a second. So, like many laws, a big framework. It has some specific things that we are going through now, but we'll see in a couple of seconds. The AI Act does not basically enter into force at one piece. This is going to happen step by step. Why that? Of course, so that the companies like you can adapt and can modify their product and do some kind of meaningful release planning. Sorry. The entry into force happened this month. In 6 months from now, the prohibited AI practices will be forbidden. More to that in a second. In 12 months from now, the national countries like Czech Republic, Austria, and everyone else here has to define their notified bodies. And some requirements for governance will enter into force, and so do the general purpose AI requirements. And in 2 years yet to come, the high risk system requirements start to be active. And so do all the other requirements. That means we'd say on 2nd of August 2026, the major part of the AI Act will enter force. And there are, of course, some exceptions, like 36 months later, or 3 years, so to say. The Annex 1 requirements will enter force. So we'll see that in a second again. There's some kind of stepwise rollout, and the last step is in 2030, which is still quite a while to go. The public regulators need to follow with their systems. The AI Act is a risk-based approach, meaning we don't forbid or raise constraints on the technology altogether. We don't even constrain research on these kind of technologies. What we do is, like with the other regulations, define what will it be used for, and is there an existential threat or risk linked to that kind of use. I just quickly go through the 4 levels. The top of the pyramid is the unacceptable risk AI. That's what, when we think about practices in China, like social scoring, public mass surveillance of biometric parameters, there's also emotion recognition or tiredness recognition in the employment area, or predictive policing. All of these kind of things are considered a too big risk for democratic processes and are therefore banned. I always tend to say here, as long as you're a private civil company. It looks a bit different for secret services or for military operators. They are not subject of the AI Act, of course. So just for us, basically, this is unacceptable. There's the high risk area. That's classical, the way where basically everything which has been harmonized under safety or compliance standards is also there again, like that's including toys, that's including civil aviation, machinery safety, medical devices, and all of these kind of things. And what I mentioned before, the Annex 1 of the AI Act says that everything which is already under harmonization has a bit more time before they start with the AI Act, because there is already some safety testing framework. And Annex 3, basically the categorization by topic, starts immediately. That means everyone who is dealing with biometrics or critical infrastructure like energy supply, gas supply, water, or justice and democratic processes or education has to start with the AI Act a year earlier. Why? Because in these areas we don't have the harmonized standards, so therefore more need for regulation is seen. We have the quite big group of limited risk AI systems, like the classical chatbots, the image creators, video generators, whatever you see online. Also these kind of, how's it called, the GPT 4.0, the multimodal systems fall into that class. They are considered limited risk because it does not directly hurt anyone or kill anyone, but you could basically lead to misleading information in the internet. You could trick people, and that's why in that area we have transparency requirements. We must tell our users who or what they are interacting with. And last but not least, the big area of minimal risk AI, that can be spam filters or some kind of video game contents, like everything that basically is just not in that regulation because it cannot in a meaningful way harm anyone. Yeah, we wrote here that for high risk, there's a set of requirements that we have to fulfill. I'd like to just briefly show you what that means and what these systems can look like. For the high risk systems, we need, I also placed the link to the articles of the AI Act here, to first of all to implement a risk management system. That means we have to find out whether or not our system can cause harms, what kind of harms it can cause, and how severe they are. So therefore, the risk management system, we need some kind of defined cycle where we identify risks on different steps of the evaluation, and how we can also discuss about different risks. One requirement that is basically valid for all kinds of risk classes is that we need, as a company, to find out what are the basics of AI safety and what is the AI Act. It's called the literacy requirement, because, of course, as you can see here, that would be quite a loophole if I say, if I don't think in the first place that it's a high-risk system, I don't need to do this. Unfortunately not. So everyone needs to train or read something about what is AI safety, and am I potentially a high-risk system? And if yes, then we have to start with this analysis. We have to discuss data and data governance. As we heard, the big difference to classical software in the world of AI is that we learn from data, and that we have to make sure that there is no bias in this data, at least not any bias that we don't want to be there. That's a deeper question. And that the quality of the data and, for example, the labeling of the data in supervised learning setups is of the correct quality so that we can have any meaningful results. We need to provide technical documentation, like for other safety systems, like what are the assumptions of use, what do I need to do before using it, how to make sure that the system is still operating. We need to make spend some thoughts on record keeping and other applications of this kind. We must ensure transparency and user information, also in some kind of handbook. Make sure that human supervision is in place. That's an interesting thing that the AI says whenever we have high-risk systems, there must be a human in the loop somewhere in a meaningful way. So of course, I would not place 100% human supervision there, otherwise I can skip the AI. But in some kind of way, we must add this. And we also have requirements on accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity. Accuracy would mean that the predictions are as basically they were designed to be. Robustness means how good can the system deal with different kind of perturbations or difficulties. And cybersecurity, of course, is how well is it protected against unwanted access or attacks from outside. So quite a literacy that we have to go through. And for that, of course, maybe you heard about it, there are even ISO standards already framing how to put up an AI management system like the ISO 42001. That is also something that we basically implement and consult at TÜV if companies need that in order to be ready for the next steps with the AI Act. Yeah, something that we hear out there a lot in the media is that the European Union is basically stopping innovation and making it very hard for companies to place anything on the market. I'm not so sure with that because according to estimations of the AI Act, maximally 15% of the systems will be in the high-risk area because most AI development, most AI systems are not exactly there. And we have been faced with approaches that people want to have some kind of language control for robots to switch them off safely in some kind of production environment. And this is definitely not what I would consider. That's not just in the AI Act, that's some hint I give for free, basically for machinery safety. Safety critical things or basically financially critical things should always be implemented with the, say, easiest available technology. And I'd say most of the added value and the revenue that's generated by AI or that people expect from AI is not exactly in the, let's say, safety area. So that's one reason. It will not affect too many systems, and for most of the others, it's just transparency requirements and basically the necessity to read the standardization. The penalties which are defined are quite severe. It's up to 7% of the global company turnover or 35 million, whichever is higher, meaning for big companies or big corporations, that can be already quite a lot of money that they spend if there's any violation. So there should be a high interest in keeping the AI Act requirements. It's a little bit, or let's say closely aligned with the general data protection legislation, because there we also have these percentages of global annual turnover, something that should really motivate companies to keep in line with that. That was all on AI applications. That's also one thing that's probably important to keep in mind. The AI Act makes the differentiation between AI models or general purpose models. That's basically GPT-4o, a model that is not trained for a specific purpose, but on the other side, just a general AI that can be tailored and customized for any kind of applications that I want to do. And these general purpose AI models don't have so many requirements in the AI Act. Why is that? They are not built for a specific purpose. That means, as we heard, the risk is defined, or the requirements from the AI Act are defined based on the risk that occurs based on the application. But when it's general purpose, we can't really say how it's used. Here we have another approach in the AI Act. We make a split into basically into how powerful are these models. And they say there's a field of systemic risk models. Whatever kind of model is, say, big enough, has a big enough data set, a big enough number of users, has potentially the threat to disrupt economy or disrupt some kind of operations in this, in the European Union, as we have maybe seen with the outage of Microsoft some days ago. So that's what they classify as systemic risk models, big enough to run on many applications in many kind of fields. So we have special monitoring requirements and risk assessment requirements on that one. We have other GPIA models who just need to document basically where did they get the data from and how the system is to be used. And we have, let's say, very, very huge field of other AI models, like all models which are not big enough and not powerful enough and just trained for a specific purpose are just not considered here. So if you take some open source model, which is a smaller one for some specific application context, it's 99% in the other AI model area. Now we heard what we have to do when developing AI. We have heard what we need to do, or what the guys need to do who are developing general purpose models. There's one third class that might be interesting for basically anyone, probably also here in the meeting, which is deploy requirements. That means when you deploy requirements on the market, when you're the interface between whatever kind of system you purchase or develop and then put on the market or use inside of your company, then you also have some requirements to fulfill. First of all, the AI literacy requirement. That means you have to have some kind of proof, or let's say considerable effort spent on finding out if your system or if your AI system could cause harms and go through the AI Act in some kind of way. And you have to generate transparency for the downstream actors, like high and limited risk applications, or say that is valid for high and limited risk applications. And the rest of the requirements, like human oversight, monitoring, incident handling processes, etc., are just mandatory for the high risk field. So as mentioned, for most of the systems, which is like 85% or something like that, we just have this requirement that we know about the AI Act and about AI safety in general on a high level, and communicate in some cases that content was produced by AI. Not that bad, actually. And a conclusion or a small reminder to the AI Act. That was a very quick walk through the AI Act requirements. We have like 50 minutes more to go with AI trustworthiness, and in the end you will have the possibility also to ask questions or discuss anything of your interest. That was really just a very short glimpse. If you need more info on the AI Act, you can of course contact any one of us from TÜV Austria, or also have a look at the site. As you might have heard, there's a bureau of AI operations, or the AI office in Brussels now, and they have a lot of information material online that might be worth a look as well, if you need more details. Or of course the hardcore version to really go through the AI Act, but that's, I'd say, some 100 pages of fun. So I think a course or training or workshop might be the more convenient way to digest this kind of legislation. And here, just to round the picture down, even today and even before the requirements for the AI Act are mandatory in 2026, we are not really in a legal vacuum. That means also today we have requirements for safety, for data protection, for cybersecurity resilience that we need to follow. And they are, of course, still valid, independent of the technology that we use. That means even today, if we have some AI, it doesn't mean that we can skip these, say, well-trusted principles and activities And even today, I think there is should be a strong interest in deploying and building AI systems that do what they're supposed to do. Yeah, just for be it revenue, be it the reputation of the company, or just having a satisfying system internally that can do what I want it to do. And that's where basically we also come into play with our trusted AI framework, as we call it, because when you take a closer look at the AI Act, it gives us a lot of topics that we should deal with. It gives us the hint that we should discuss risks that can arise from AI, but it does not give us really, let's say, any kind of concrete steps or concrete methods that we should apply or follow, and does not give us any management guidelines about how these processes should look like in my company. It just says do that, and later on it will be assessed and specified in detail if that's basically correct or not. And this gap is right now filled by several private standards and by basically what the state of the art and research is publishing. And we at TÜV Austria have a summary for that, which is basically melted down all the already published and soonly published standards and white papers and documentations available, and also what's from the AI Act available, into some kind of management and product testing framework with about 300 requirements to follow, with basically concrete steps like how to do the competence management, how to do the incident reporting, and also how to make sure that, for example, my explainability measures are sufficient for the target application. That's what we basically provide as a additional set of requirements and best practices on how to do safe AI and how to manage safe AI at a point of time where the standardization is still ongoing. And that also means we are regularly updating this kind of catalog. We are also represented in the standardization committees to have a close grasp. Coming to the question in a second. And this catalog can also be requested for free at us. We are basically having it as a private certification scheme. And the requirements are public, only, of course, the testing targets are not, because that would lead to the design to test problem what we have with AI. Just read the question a second. To the first question, that's an excellent point. We basically published a paper 2 weeks ago because we want to force a change in the AI Act from our point of view. Of course, also not just from our point of view, of course, anything that you do with AI during training, you are inferring from the training data just during the training process. And then when you lock the system, basically it's just a stupid tree search. It's just a multiplication task. And if you take the definition of AI from the AI Act as it is today, it would be possible to argue that, as you say here, a locked AI system is not learning anymore and therefore not part of the AI Act. But I think this is a flaw that needs to be corrected, because otherwise that would make the AI Act pretty useless, unfortunately. And I believe that will be sharpened. In that paper that we published some weeks ago, we proposed a 3-factor approach in order to answer the question whether or not AI will, or a piece of software will be basically labeled as AI or not. And we are trying to basically push that on a European level as some kind of amendment or change in the AI Act, because we also think it's not really clear now. The AI Act leaves a lot of holes and basically creates a lot of uncertainty, unfortunately. So I'd say yes. But from a lawyer's perspective, it could be discussed still. And the second question, the SMBD yeah, when it's about expert software, so I'd say the AI Act. Okay. When machine learning basically, when I have it just for internal purposes, I have to also consider a set of things. So I cannot basically violate the data protection or anything like that. And I also have to make sure that the people who use it are aware about what they are doing. So I have to basically add some probably guidelines. But when I then don't deploy it in the market, and when I just use it, we also have AI simulation tools. Or yeah, basically, if you look to Linz in Austria, where I'm located, there's the NXAI, who is trying to revolutionize the mechanical and thermal simulation field with their AI-based software. Then we can argue that it's not really part of the product. So I believe that would need a closer look to make the final decision. But on a first glimpse, it's a bit like in the ISC 61508, sorry for the excurse to the terms, the machinery functional safety, where we say it makes a difference whether it's basically used to build the system or if it's really a onboard system. And as long as it's not onboard, as long as it's not an active system in the field out there, we can discuss that it does not need to fulfill all the requirements when it's not going outside. But as I said, this is not a decision that I can forward without knowing exactly the product, because it also depends how much, say, influence does the decision of the system have. We had customers, for example, where we discussed the expert system with the client, or a client let us certify an expert system, which is more or less detection of, now I'm not a medical person, I'm the engineer, say changes in the tissue which indicate early phases of cancer, in my words. So that's also the same story. We basically just give recommendations and tell the doctor, hey, look there, or hey, that looks unusual and that could be with 80% probability this. But still, it would be an AI system, because we'd say it has a strong impact on the decision of the doctor, most probably, and might even have an impact on missing out something, or go completely in the wrong direction with its recommendations. Or it could, for example, have some kind of strong bias in it and just work with, say, people of some specific gender or race or whatever. And that's also something what the deployer of this system wanted to avoid at any cost, because also the company internally wants to make sure basically that their thing is not violating any human rights or anything like that, even if it's not deployed in the market. So it depends, kind of. Does that kind of answer the question, or it's a pity we cannot talk here? Just text. Yeah, that's actually the same topic than we had with our certification problem. And one question is, would it be already in the medical device regulation or in the medical software regulations? Because there's, of course, functional safety standards for medtech that need to be considered, or for in vitro diagnosis. And if they apply, if it's in that field, then the AI Act applies as well. If not, it would need a second look, I think. But that the specialist decides in the end of the day is basically not a reason that we are out of the AI Act, because for all high-risk systems, we even must make sure that a human is in the loop, so that still is inside, kind of. Okay, then I'd say the AI Act is there as well. But just 1 year later, because it's the Annex 1 of the Act. So I just, sure, welcome. I'll just make some more slides to stay on track. Okay, one more. Yes, actually, there's a joint research committee already formed by the Commission. They have the task to analyze where there are holes in the standards. They published a quite interesting paper in basically outlining what kind of things are already covered and where there are holes. And right now, the Senelec is forming new expert groups and basically requesting new standards to be pushed through. And in the standardization committees, we're having quite some wrinkles on the forehead, because that's not much time left in order to do these standardizations. And also, I think beginning of last month, the Commission also called for some kind of experts who would be willing to contribute on top of that to discuss how the next steps can look like. I can send I'm not sure if I can send something to you afterwards, but I just try to distribute a link or give it to Zdeněk. Maybe he can distribute, or you can ask him then for the link, because yeah, just for some additional info. But there are some things going on. Yeah, it's very well known that this is quite not a big advantage as it is now. As you say, we want to create legal clearness with that AI Act, but in the end of the day, it has so many holes and still contradictions that, yeah, it does quite the opposite. And we have to fill that before the first requirements, the first specific requirements in 2 years come into place and into force. So, sorry. Yeah, then very welcome. I'd start with the next chapter, the AI trustworthiness evaluation. Because now we talked about what the AI Act requests and what AI basically would look like. And now some slides at least about our approach that we researched in the last, say, 6 years at TÜV Austria together with our partners about how to make it safe and basically make it doing what we want it to do. One thing that is often forgotten, trustworthiness must be understood in the context of the application, and be it, let's say, some kind of image recognition for medical applications or some other kind of autonomous driving applications and these kind of systems. We have a hard time in defining what the concrete task of the system is, because we cannot formally specify the application and the function. Because unfortunately, then we could already implement it with normal software. So one big hole in this whole topic is that the application definition is always a bit unclear, and we have to make sure to define clearly what's in, what's out, and what's the distribution that we expect. And that's the first step towards some kind of trustworthy AI. And derived from that, we have to basically identify what's the application domain, what's the function that we want to represent, and what kind of risks can arise from that. That might be risks for health and safety, but that might also be risks for big financial losses or risks for any kind of human rights violation. That means the field of risks is quite wide here, a bit wider than the classical safety, and we must carry out some analysis that gives us a meaningful overview about what could possibly happen if inside of my domain the system is not working properly. This is done qualitatively, because as mentioned, we don't have that much of maths here. We can apply some kind of distributions, but in the end of the day, this is an expert discussion and some kind of guided analysis on finding out what's in, what's out, and is it well enough defined. And only later on, we can carry out the quantitative assessment. That means there are quantitative tests, quantitative analysis that we have to carry out to make sure, do we have, or does the basically distribution of data that we will use for training kind of correlate with what we expect in the real world? Did we cover sufficient, say, corner cases? Did we cover sufficient examples in order to have a, say, reliable learning curve that can also generalize for different examples? And last but not least, we probably have some interface, we have some embeddings, which is pre-processing, post-processing the data, doing the input-output. And that also has to be considered for a whole AI application. And basically, in the end, we have the society and the environment, and they have some performance expectation. And that's basically the validation phase, when we say, does basically the whole chain from the design process to the training process to the embedding process reflect what the society expected, or are there any gaps that basically leaked into the whole chain via the engineering and design and rollout process? And to every of these steps, we of course have some kind of requirements and audit questions to harness this kind of process in a kind of way that we can make sure what's the end output. A little bit like in cybersecurity or functional safety, because in the end of the day, what we have is software, and the methods are not so far from that, just with different focus on this data and basically statistical approach. Some people asked already in our, yeah, I will send the link to Staniak afterwards, and he can distribute it, I'd suggest, because I don't find it so fast. I would have to close the presentation for a second. To the question, what can be certified? We have been asked, basically, can AI generally be certified today? What kind of standards can be used? How do you do that? As mentioned, the standards are still in process. There are some good ones in draft that will come out in 1 or 2 years. There are some medium ones which are already outside and published, and there are lots of national implementations, like VDA published some kind of technical guidelines, and others did. But in the end of the day, in 2 years, we will know more, because by then the standards must be finished, and we have to find in the standardization committees some kind of way to organize that. We are also discussing with, for Czech Republic, it's on the University of Ostrava, a colleague, affiliate or partner who is supporting us in the standardization for Czech Republic. And we try to do our part so that these standards will be finished when we need them. And that means by now we just have our private scheme, which reflects all the standards that we know about and which are about to come. Other players said that our scheme is quite advanced and ahead of what other standardizations are doing, because what's out there in standards is very often just governance or ethics or something like that, but not the statistics. And we just try to also make our concept, the Trusted AI framework, part of the standardization. Of course, then we have to say goodbye to the IP, but that's another story. And meaning we are ahead of what the market does and what the standardization does. And we try our best that when you do some certifications or some consultings with us, that they will fit what the AI Act and different standards will require, because it's best practice what we try to transport. And what we certify usually is fields like computer vision, as mentioned, in automotive, in medicine, in processing industry, in chemical industry in some cases. We have the big field of damage detection, like all these use of existing information or frequencies or temperatures or power consumption in a bigger electromechanical system that can be really interesting in order to predict the future states of the whole system. In the office area, we do cybersecurity and knowledge management in many cases, like big corporations who want to, say, find a way how to handle their specifications, their requirements, or how to handle 25 years of notes and kind of information that was written down on say, papers. I had a recent customer, without saying any name, they told me if they would just open all the written notes and put it into 3 different folders to classify them, they would need 2 full-time employees for 2 years to do so. So that's a field where AI is used. And in the, say, banking sector, or let's say trading sector, etc., or insurances, we sometimes have to do with performance prediction. So no one's killed here, but still, when, say, the categories of the loan are wrong, or the interest is calculated incorrectly, or anything like that, or the loss risk is incorrectly calculated, then of course that's something to be considered for our clients. There's one more slide on this topic of the soft sensors, because it's something that we see quite a lot. When we have some mechanical system that we say, you can of course always detect everything. You can look at different kind of states of the machine, but with AI, you can do it much more sophisticated, and basically much earlier, before some damage occurs, you can see and find what's kind of going wrong, and what kind of parts need to be exchanged and maintained before it could come to any kind of system outage or dangerous system state. And for safety as well as for processes which are just expensive before they fail. Here are some examples, without going through all of them, where this can be a topic. As mentioned, our catalog basically covers the AI Act. It also covers what we have on standards, and it's updated almost, I'd say, quarterly right now, because we have these 3 PhDs sitting on a university doing research. If some of you ever heard of Professor Hochreiter, who is quite a well-renowned researcher in the AI field, who basically invented LSTM a couple of decades ago. He's also partner of ours and supporting us, basically mentoring. He doesn't have too much time, but taking a look at where the direction is going. So we tried to really have some cutting-edge scientists in our group in order to be ahead of what others do. And our whole framework, as mentioned before, we need to take a look at the whole chain, and that means we also have 3 pillars that we follow. First is secure and safe software development. We have a lot of things to do in the classical security, in the classical methods of how to program safely and how to make sure that our specifications are correctly done so that we don't miss out anything. We have the functional requirements field, which is basically the whole set of statistics, also with some methods that we specifically developed for this kind of context. Here's a link to the white paper if you would like to have a look. It's already 3 years old, which is quite ancient in the AI world, but we'll bring a new one, an update next year. And we have the field of ethics and privacy. So we are cooperating with lawyers in that field for media law and EU law in order to do this assessment, because we are mainly engineers and auditors and data scientists, but we also, of course, have this pillar and need to check that these requirements are compliant and in line. That's basically quite a point landing what I wanted to show to you. Here's also the contacts again with Zdeněk, the managing director in TÜV Austria, Czech Republic, and then the people, including me, who are working on the projects and who do the consultings/trainings/assessments afterwards. Would there be any additional questions? We'd have some more minutes. If there are no more questions, I'd like to thank you for your time and also kindly invite you to contact any one of us for further questions, or if you would have any need for, of course, deeper information or workshop or training, we are available quite on the short scale and always try to be there when needed. So thanks a lot for your attention, and hopefully talk to you soon. Have a great rest of the day.